Hi, I'm Julia, and I'm at the Greenville Springs branch of the East Baton Rouge Parish Library System. And today I'm going to show you how to sew a pleated fabric mask with fabric ties. Your grab-and-go kits should contain 2 pieces of fabric, 2 rectangles that are 9.5 inches by 6.5 inches, 1 colored, 1 plain. The plain one is the one that'll go to your face. It will have lines for sewing guides, for sewing your hems on the wrong side, and guides for your pleats on the right side. There will be 4 folded and ironed strips of fabric that are 15 inches long for your ties, 2 spools of thread, and a packet that contains 2 sewing needles and 6 pins. You will need to have a pair of scissors at home to cut your thread. If you're doing it at home with your own materials instead of fabric ties, you can also use clean shoelaces, 2 pairs, 1 on each side, or if you have really long shoelaces, you can cut each pair in half. Or you can use elastic, about 7 inches, 2 pieces of 7-inch elastic with each end sewn into a corner. So we're going to start with the long skinny pieces in your kit. These are going to be the ties that attach to the corners of the mask and tie behind your head to keep it on your face. You should have 4 of them in your bag, long, skinny, folded strips. These have already been ironed for you into the correct size and shape. You can see how it's been folded from a slightly wider long strip into a super skinny long strip. And that's so that we can sew the rough edges, the cut edges, onto the inside so that it won't unravel. So you're going to want to pull out one of your needles and a piece of thread. And you want the thread to be a little over twice as long as your strip. Here, we'll back up and I'll show you. So here's the full length of the strip. And to sew it, you will want to get 1, come back, 2, not quite all the way to a 3rd. And snip your thread. Coming back in, thread your needle, find your other end of your thread, match them up, and pull it out so that the needle is at the halfway point. Then, this is a very nifty way to knot your thread. Take your loose ends, I'm going to hold them right up against the eye of the needle. I'm going to wrap the thread twice around the needle and pull it so I'm holding those wrapped ends. I'm going to pull the needle and then the thread through those little loops that I made, and we get a nice snug knot. Now we're going to start sewing this down. I'm going to take my needle, I'm going to go in between, and I'm going to go up on one side. Pull it all the way through. I'm going to tuck my loose end in like that. I'm going to go back once. Back towards the cut end of the fabric. Pull it through. And I'm going to go back in on the other side a little ways so that it comes out past where my first stitch went. Be careful to watch your thread so that it doesn't tangle or get caught up in your tie. Going to do a simple running stitch a little closer to the open side than the folded side. You don't have to worry too much about it being super neat. You don't have to worry too much about it being super straight. We're just going to go back and forth and back and forth all the way down. I'm going to show you a little bit, and then I'm going to put in a cut and show you how to finish it. Make sure you're pulling both threads so that one thread doesn't come through unevenly and leave a little loop. If it tries to knot up like that, you just pull it back a little. Sometimes you can stick your needle through that loop. And pull it right back through. Pull that back out, bring it through. Be careful, it's really easy to stick yourself when you're doing this. See, it's catching around the end. See, well, I've done something very silly here. I went around the fabric instead of going back in on the same side. So I'm going to have a little loop like that. I'm just going to go right back in right here. I'm not going to pull this tight. I'm going to go right back in, come out, and keep going. It's not the end of the world. It's not as pretty as it could be, but we just need these. We just need your mask to stay on. And for that, we just need these to stay sewn together. Oh, I'm getting all twisty. Now, your thread might start twisting a lot and knotting more easily. Just pull it through your fingers. Maybe open it up, stick your fingers in between, and pull it out and let that twist unwind. It's like when you're winding a cord and it gets so twisty that it starts coiling up on itself. You can take bigger stitches, you can take smaller stitches. You don't want your stitches to be too much bigger than this, or it's not going to give enough support to the fabric to keep it together well. Careful, it's going through both sides every time. I got a little close to the edge there. And again, if you miss a stitch, if one comes out just a little on the side, it's not a tragedy. The more you practice sewing, the better you will get, just like anything else. All right, I'm going to make a cut here and I'll come back to show you how to finish this piece off. I'm going to take the two ends and put them close to each other but not matching. This is the raw edge, this is the folded edge. We want the raw edge to stick out a little farther. Try and keep it unlooped, untwisted. And so then I'm going to fold it up and up, kind of in thirds here. So it looks like this. This is the raw edge. I'm going to find my folded edge, bring it out, and use it. Bring it around, tuck it under itself. And pull it like that so that we have a tied bundle with enough of this edge to pin down to our fabric. All right, I've got all 4 of my ties bundled up with the rough edges sticking out. Now we're going to work on attaching them to the main mask fabric. I've got 2 squares here, 2 rectangles. I've got 2 rectangles here in different colors. This is going to be the part that goes on my face. This is going to be the part that goes outside. You can do it with the same color. You can do it with different colors. Just keep track of which one is which. When you're working with fabric like this, a lot of times you'll be working with fabric like this, where there's a fancy pattern on one side and the other side is dull and plain. This is what we call the right side of the fabric and the wrong side of the fabric. Because I'm working with 2 pieces that are the same on both sides, I have a little label. This is going to be the wrong side of the fabric, and this is going to be the right side of the fabric. Same for the other piece. Here's my wrong side and my right side. I'm going to start by taking my front outward facing piece, placing it right side up. And to this, I'm going to pin my tie. We want this tie, this edge, to come really close to the fabric edge here, so that when we sew the seams of the 2 pieces together, this will be sewn in and will be secure. So we're going to get really close to the edge and stick a pin through it. Stick it back through to keep it secure. I'm going to do this on every corner. And be careful, try not to stick yourself. All right, now I've got my ties pinned down. I'm going to keep the right side up. I'm going to lay the other piece of fabric down over top with the right side down. So that the right sides are together and the wrong sides are facing out. And your ties are cut up in the middle. I'm going to take a couple more pins. I'm going to pin near the edges. Doing our best to keep the edges matched up. And now we get to start sewing. And you can see this is still the wrong side. Now, I'm going to start sewing at the bottom just to one side of the middle. Down and through, come back up, try and keep to your line. I'm going to go through that thread there. I'm going to go back just a little bit through. So on this side, I'm going to go past this stitch, come out the other side past the first stitch, I'm going to keep coming and I'm going to pull it through, go back in just before the previous stitch. I'm going to go in right here. So I've got our two stitches like that. Come through again. A little ways past that first stitch, that second stitch. Pull it through, head back and through. This is called a back stitch. This is what it's going to look like on the opposite side. And we're just going to keep doing this all the way around until we get to about here. I'm going to go ahead and keep stitching. I will cut back when I get to the corners and when I run out of thread. All right, well, I'm getting around to a corner. So I'm going to work very carefully. Coming around. Continuing to back stitch up into the point. where I get to my tie. Now I've got the tie situated so that it's mostly to the side at a slight angle, and it's mostly going to be along the short side. I'm going to come in here, it's going to catch right around here and go up so that this is all sewn into the fabric of the mask, into the seams. I'm actually going to take a couple stitches along here, right back here, so that this end here, this tip, is sewn into the hem. At the corner. Go just past my marked corner. And make a tiny stitch like that. Being careful not to get tangled. So that I can start coming up this way. And I'm pushing through all the layers of fabric here. It's going to be like 6 layers of fabric, because there's one piece that's folded over to 4 layers, and then these 2 layers. So it's a lot to push through, but you're going to want to take fairly small stitches here. And back down through. Coming up. And again, I took really small stitches so that I could go through all the layers of my tie as many times as I could. I'm going to reach in, I'm going to pull my pin out. I'm going to come back, take a couple of stitches, through this edge. Back down, going back down to the line. Not that much of an angle. Make sure my edges are even and go right back into the back stitch. I'm going to reposition my pin just to make sure I've got those edges lined up. And if you're having trouble with these other ties, if they're flopping around and giving you trouble, you can pull the pin and just sew until you get to about here. You just have to make certain and remember to pin it back to the inside once you get there. and back to stitching. Looks like I missed a layer and came around, but that's okay. There's no hole, so not a great loss. It's a little oops, not a big one. Be careful not to pull too tight. Did it again. And be careful, you are actually going through both layers of fabric as you sew this bit. It's going to buckle a little bit when I turn it inside out, but this is where we're going to put the pleats, so it's not going to hamper how the mask works. If you need to turn it back and forth every time, to make sure you're putting the thread where you want it, that's fine. All right, you can see. See how it only pulled on one side there? One thread is longer than the other. I'm going to separate my threads and pull on each one individually until this longer piece pulls through even. I'm letting my edges get disconnected. But you can see here also I'm coming towards the end of my thread. I could go a little farther, but really not that much. So I'm going to tie this off. I've pulled it through there, around the back. I'm going to go through the loop that I just sewed, pull it tight, go through again, and before I pull it tight, I'm going to go back through this loop and pull that. Get a nice tight little knot. Cut it loose. Rethread your needle. Knot it. And start back right where you left off. Even your edges. Pull it through and go into a back stitch. I like to go through the loop at the end by the knot and then just continue. And I'll see you as soon as I get to the next corner. All right, here I am at the next corner. I'm going to put my tie back in. Remember, I pulled this out to show you how to do it in case it's getting in your way. I want it about like that. A little bit of an angle, getting right across that corner. Let's stick a pin through very simply, just to keep it where I want it. While I stitch the corner down. Be aware of where your thread is so that you're not looping through it as you go around. I want to make sure that I'm not doing that. Again, I'm taking much smaller stitches as I go through the tie material. and making sure they go through all of the layers of fabric. There we go. Again, make sure we're going through all the layers. And another small stitch. Coming up back here. And another, I'm going through the tie just to reinforce a little. Again, something like this isn't going to affect how the mask works, so it's not a big deal. There. Now I'm going to take a very small stitch along this axis and go back right into the corner. Hold. There we go. If you need to hold it like that, that's fine. Make sure your tie tucks in. You want to move your, if you want to move your pin over, match up your edges, and continue sewing down this side. I'm going to run out of thread again before I get all the way down. I'm just going to change it out just like you saw before. I'll get back to you when I get to around here. We've done two corners now. One where it's pinned in to start, one where I added it in just before sewing. So I'm going to come all the way around and stop when I have 2 fingers left to sew. All right, so now I have got this all sewn up around the edges except for a little over 1 inch, about 2 fingers at the bottom. Now, see, I have not cut my thread. The needle is still attached. Now I'm going to open up at this little hole. I'm going to reach in. I'm going to see if I can find one of my ties. I'm going to use that tie to start pulling this right side out. work it around, push the corners through. There's another tie. Pull that. Watch your thread so you don't get too tangled. Find another tie. There's the last tie. Pull that corner through. Make sure your thread is not too tangled. And look at that. You have a right side out mask. Now, generally what you want to do here is iron this. Iron your seam, pull these seams out and iron them. If you don't have an iron, you can use a little water and get the seams wet and then press them flat under a book with some plastic or something else heavy and flat so that they dry flat. All right, so here's our mask ironed out flat at the top and the bottom. Top, we're going to put some pleats in. I'm going to pinch up a little bit of fabric and fold it down. And then we're going to pin it on either side. Dragons being exiled.
Oh, yeah. For his own safety.
And ours.
Yeah.
And now, you're going to take your needle and thread. Going to send it through one side here. Like so. And I'm going to do a straight stitch, a running stitch like we did for the ties, all the way around the edge. Closing up that hole with the first go. We're getting back to the ties. This will further attach them. Changing directions. Going up the side. This is how we're going to sew down the pleats. So make sure you're going through all of the layers here. Don't pull too tight, you don't want to squinch it. And you don't want to get your ties caught up in it, so watch that too. All right. Now I'm going to go around twice. I'm going to do a second layer, or second. When I get back around to here, I'm going to start back up and do a second line of stitches just a little farther in. I will get back and I will come back to you when we get there, and I'll show you how to tie it off. All right, and here's the mask with top stitching, which is what we call these stitches around the edges. This is top stitching. Top stitching is all complete. I'm just getting ready to tie off my thread. To do this, I'm going to go up, in and up at an angle. I'm trying to come out in between my two pieces of fabric there. I'm going to take a teeny tiny stitch right there at the top and make my knot. And then I'm going to go back down through the two layers of fabric. The needle is in between the two layers of fabric. I'm going down for a little ways, pulling it through on one side, squinching the fabric so that there's pulling the thread most of the way through, cutting the thread, and when I pull it out, the thread is caught in between the two layers. And so there we have a pleated face mask.